If you think hell only begins after death, let me tell you mine began in my own living room with my son holding a bucket of pig slop and grinning like a madman. I raised that boy with my own 2 hands, once soft and graceful from years of chalk and books. Now they tremble from arthritis and tremble harder from betrayal. I'm 72, my legs barely move, and every breath drags through my lungs like knives thanks to late-stage COPD. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own flesh and blood treated me like livestock. My name is Margaret Gray. Once I stood proud in front of blackboards and taught generations how to read, write, and dream. Now I sit broken in a dark corner of my son's farmhouse, waiting for the next cruel game he and his wife dream up. It didn't start like this. It started with love. It started with hope. And it started with a single decision that destroyed my life. 3 years ago, I had a minor stroke. I remember falling in the garden roses blooming in front of me while the world blurred. The hospital stay drained everything I had: savings, health, dignity. When I was discharged weak and barely able to walk, my son Daniel offered to take me in. "Stay with us, Mom," he said. "We'll take care of you." Back then I believed him. I packed the last few books from my teacher's cabinet, the framed photo of my late husband, and my medicine. I thought I was going to rest, heal, and spend my last years hearing grandchildren's laughter. Instead, I entered a cage and they threw away the key. At first, it was small things. Cold meals, shouting if I used the bathroom too long, no TV. Then his wife, Emily, took control of the house of Daniel, of everything. She sneered at my coughing fits, hid my pills, mocked my limp. She said old people were parasites. I heard her whisper one night, it'd be better if she just died in her sleep. I should have left, but where would I go? No relatives, no money, no legs that could carry me. Then came the day that broke me, when Daniel slapped away my bowl of soup and said I'd eat what the pigs eat if I wanted to live under his roof. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but it wasn't. He dragged me by the arm, my weak knees buckling, out the back door, past the flies, to the pigsty. The stench was unbearable. The bucket was already prepared leftovers, mold-rotten vegetables, slop. He handed me a spoon. "You want to live here," he said. "Then eat like the useless animal you are." I looked at my son's face and I didn't recognize it anymore. I looked up at the gray sky and felt a tear roll down my cheek. He thought I was powerless, but what he didn't know was someone had been watching, and someone was coming. Daniel wasn't always like this. He used to be the kind of boy who brought me wildflowers after school and cried when he broke the neighbor's window. He used to hold my hand tightly when crossing the street. But time and Emily changed him. I remember the shift vividly. It was subtle at first. He became more withdrawn after marrying her, quieter, shorter with his words. At first I thought it was the stress of the farm, of managing his late father's debts. I tried to help where I could, even after my stroke. I offered advice, offered what little pension I had left. But Emily didn't like that. She hated when I spoke. She rolled her eyes, mocked me under her breath, and always acted like I was in the way. "You should be in a home," she'd say. "This isn't a charity house." Then Daniel started siding with her. He stopped responding when she snapped at me. He started telling me to be more grateful whenever I asked for help getting to the bathroom, or when I spilled soup on my lap because of my trembling hands. But the worst part, the way he looked at me, like I was no longer his mother but a burden. One day I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear, Emily's voice cold and sharp. We could sell the land if she was gone. Daniel didn't say anything. That silence rang louder than any answer. From that day, I started to watch them more closely. I started noticing how they'd leave spoiled food for me, how Emily swapped my meds for cheap supplements. I realized then they didn't just want me gone, they wanted me to suffer first, to break me. And I almost let them. Almost. Until I remembered one person who still cared. Someone who once told me, "If you ever feel unsafe, call me. I don't care what time it is." Her name was Claire, one of my old students, now a nurse. She used to visit during my recovery, read to me, change my bandages, and bring hot soup. But after I moved in with Daniel and Emily, they made sure to cut her off. They said I needed privacy and rest. But one evening while they were out, I managed to get to my phone and send a voice message. My fingers barely worked and my breathing was short, but I said the words, "Claire, help me, please." I didn't hear back, but I saw the message went through. And then days passed, more abuse, more slop, more pain, until the knock on the door. That day, after forcing me to the pigsty again, Emily laughed and walked back into the house. Daniel stood by the fence watching. I sat in the mud broken, but with one last spark in my chest. Then the front door slammed open. A voice rang out. "Where is she?" Emily screamed. Daniel cursed. My heart raced. Claire had arrived, and she didn't come alone. I couldn't see her from where I sat hunched in the mud, but I heard every footstep storming through that house. It was Claire, no doubt about it, fierce, unafraid, and louder than any storm I'd heard in my 72 years. Her voice cracked like lightning. "Margaret," she shouted. "Where is she?" Emily tried to block her at the door. "You can't just come in here." But Claire's voice didn't falter. "Get out of my way, Emily. I have every right, and if you touch me, I'll make sure you're the one behind bars." I heard Daniel yelling, confused, trying to contain the situation. "What the hell is this? You can't just barge into my house." "Is this how you treat your mother?" Claire roared. "I've seen livestock treated better. You're sick." Moments later, I saw her rushing through the backyard, her white nurse's coat flapping like a cape in the wind. Behind her were two men, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing blue uniforms. Police. My heart stopped, not from fear, but from hope. Claire's eyes locked onto mine, her expression twisted from rage to horror. "Oh my God." She dropped to her knees beside me, her gloved hands cupping my face with a gentleness I hadn't felt in years. "What did they do to you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I couldn't even answer. My throat was too dry from crying, from coughing, from swallowing humiliation for breakfast. The officers caught up. "Ma'am, can you confirm you're Margaret Gray?" I nodded weakly. One of them turned to Claire. "We've got it on record, your call, the voice message, the photos you sent. She's in no state to testify yet, but this is enough to take them in for questioning." "Good," Claire muttered. "They don't deserve another peaceful night." That's when Daniel came outside. "What's going on here?" he shouted. "She's senile. You're believing the words of an old woman who can't even hold a spoon." But the officer raised a hand. "Sir, step away. We'll ask the questions." Emily came trailing after him, voice high-pitched with mock concern. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding. We were just about to feed her." "Yeah," Claire snapped. "Pig slop, you disgusting excuse for a woman." Emily's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what it's like to care for someone like her. She's impossible." But Claire didn't flinch. She stood tall and pointed directly at her. "You're right. I don't know what it's like to abuse the woman who gave you everything." The officers handcuffed Daniel, then Emily. They screamed cursed, threatened lawsuits, but I didn't hear the words. My heart was too full. For the first time in years, someone had stood up for me. Claire wrapped me in a blanket. "I'm taking you out of here, Margaret. You're not staying another night with those monsters." As they walked me toward the waiting ambulance, I glanced back at Daniel's face. He wasn't angry. He looked afraid. He should be, because this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of my justice. The ambulance ride felt like floating between two worlds, one of pain, the other uncertain. The paramedics were gentle, but even their touch made me wince. Claire sat beside me, holding my hand the entire way, whispering, "You're safe now, I promise." At the hospital, they ran tests, x-rays, blood work, scans. The nurse flinched when she saw the bruises on my arms and the cuts on my legs. A doctor quietly told Claire she's severely malnourished. And from what I'm seeing, this didn't just happen yesterday. Claire didn't speak. She just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. I knew her well enough to know she was bottling up a storm. Later that evening, she sat at my bedside. The room smelled of antiseptic and a soft rain pattered on the window. I felt cleaner, warmer. But the pain was still rooted deep. Not just physical. The kind that grows from betrayal. "You know," I rasped, "he used to make me pancakes, blueberry ones, every Sunday." Claire turned to me, eyes softening. "I know." "What happened to him?" I whispered. "What did I do so wrong?" She shook her head. "You did nothing wrong. Some people, they rot from the inside when they taste power. And when they find someone willing to feed that darkness like Emily, they stop looking back." I nodded slowly, blinking tears away. Then she leaned in. "I have something to tell you." I looked up. "I didn't just call the police. I called someone else." I furrowed my brows. "Who?" She hesitated. "Someone from the Department of Elder Welfare and an old friend of yours." Just then there was a knock at the hospital door. "Come in," Claire said. And in walked Richard, my late husband's oldest friend. I hadn't seen him in over 15 years. He was grayer now, leaning on a cane, but those kind eyes were unmistakable. "Margaret," he said softly. I broke down. He came forward and wrapped me in the warmest hug I'd felt in decades. "I've been looking for you," he said. "Your husband and I made a promise. If anything ever happened to him, I'd look after you. But you disappeared." "They made sure I did," I whispered. He nodded. "Not anymore. I've hired a lawyer. A damn good one. And I have power of attorney documents your husband signed before he passed. They tried to hide it, but it's all legal." I stared in disbelief. "Daniel and Emily aren't just going to jail Margaret," he said, his voice suddenly firm. "They're going to lose everything they tried to steal from you. The house, the land, the inheritance." Claire leaned in. "They underestimated you, Margaret. But now the law is going to remind them who raised who." For the first time in years, I smiled, not out of joy, but out of relief. Because even in my weakest hour, I wasn't alone. And justice was just getting started. A week passed. I remained in the hospital recovering slowly. Every morning, Claire would bring me fresh fruit and sit beside me reading headlines aloud. And every morning the news grew louder. Elder abuse case sparks outrage in local community. Son and daughter-in-law accused of inhumane treatment. My face never appeared, but the story was unmistakably mine. Daniel and Emily's trial was moving faster than I expected. Claire had gathered evidence photos of my bruises, copies of medical reports, the voice message I sent, and even testimonies from neighbors who had heard the shouting who'd seen Emily burning boxes of what they claimed were trash. Turns out, one of those boxes contained personal belongings of mine, family letters, old photos, my teaching certificates. They were trying to erase me, but I had come back. One morning, Richard returned with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Penrose, who looked like she hadn't smiled in 10 years. "We've already frozen the family's assets," she explained. Daniel tried to protest, but once we showed the power of attorney and the bank records, the court granted an emergency order. "The farm is yours, Margaret. Everything is." I blinked, "But I don't want it. That house—" "You don't have to go back there," Richard said gently. "But you can sell it, use the money to live comfortably, or to help others like you." I nodded, my heart swelling with something unfamiliar control. Claire leaned in. "There's more." Daniel cracked during questioning, tried to blame everything on Emily. "But the police found her fingerprints on a syringe you were never prescribed. They believe she was trying to poison you slowly." My stomach turned. I wasn't just neglected. They were killing me. Deliberately. Ms. Penrose continued. "This will become a criminal trial. The charges are piling up: abuse, attempted murder, destruction of property, financial exploitation." It was overwhelming, but also empowering. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking in a corner. They were. A few days later, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single shaky line in handwriting I recognized as Daniel's. I was weak, but she made me do it. No apology, no remorse, just cowardice. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash. That night, Claire wheeled me out to the hospital garden. The moonlight spilled across the path, and for a moment I felt like I could breathe deeply again. "You know," I whispered, "I thought I was going to die in that pigsty." Claire gripped my hand. "You didn't." We sat in silence, broken only by crickets and wind through the trees. I thought of my students, the ones who wrote me letters long ago, the ones I'd lost touch with. The life I had before motherhood was twisted by betrayal, but I was reclaiming it now, piece by piece. The house might have been theirs, but my story, that was mine again. And the final chapter was still mine to write. 2 months later, I rolled through the double doors of a quiet, sunlit home, this time not the one I had been imprisoned in, but a modest cottage on the edge of town. A place with flower beds, a reading nook, and a porch swing that creaked like old memories. Claire helped me settle in. She had found the place, decorated it with soft colors, and even added a wall of bookshelves filled with poetry and classics I hadn't read in decades. She said I deserved to feel like a person again. And I did. The court case against Daniel and Emily moved quickly. The evidence was damning. Multiple witnesses testified, including neighbors, doctors, and even a former farmhand who admitted he had seen bruises on me, but was too afraid to speak. Claire, fierce as ever, sat at every hearing, giving the prosecutors everything they needed. The day the sentence was read, I didn't attend in person, but I watched it on a live stream from the comfort of my new armchair. Daniel. My son received 12 years in prison for elder abuse, conspiracy to commit harm, and financial exploitation. Emily got 17 for attempted murder and aggravated abuse. They looked hollow, empty, not the fiery dominant pair I once feared. They looked like prisoners of their own cruelty. I felt nothing. No triumph, no rage, no glee, just peace. Later that night, Richard visited. He brought a framed photo, one I hadn't seen in decades. It was me holding a chubby-faced Daniel on the steps of our old school. He was 5. He was smiling. "I found this in your old desk," Richard said gently. I stared at the photo for a long time. "That little boy is gone," I said. "He is," Richard replied. But you aren't. You're still here, and you still have something to give. That's when Claire chimed in with her idea. A community reading room, she said. You host, you guide, you read stories to kids like you used to. My chest tightened. You really think anyone would come listen to an old, crippled woman wheeze out fairy tales? Yes, she said firmly, because your voice matters. So we did it. A month later, the town library opened a corner dedicated to me, Miss Margaret's Corner. Children came every Wednesday to listen. I told stories, laughed, coughed a little, but I lived again. Every now and then, one of the kids would ask, "Do you have a son?" I'd smile softly. I used to, but now I have many. Because in the end, life doesn't always give us happy endings. Sometimes it gives us a second chance. And that is enough. If you're reading this and you're older, sick, or helpless and feel like no one sees you anymore, I want to tell you you matter. Don't stay silent. Don't believe the lies they feed you about being a burden. Abuse comes in many forms, some quiet, some loud, but all of it is wrong. And if you're a caregiver or a child to someone aging, love is not measured by convenience but by compassion. When you forget where you came from, you risk becoming someone unrecognizable. Justice came to me late, but it did come because one person cared enough to listen. Be that person for someone else, or ask for one. You're not done yet, and your voice still matters.